our top real estate agent, he still grinds, and he closed 84 transactions with no team by himself last year. And our average price point in our area is around 550,000. So if he's averaging about 2%, he made close to near $1 million last year.
Being a real estate agent is potentially a very lucrative career, but it's also an industry with a high failure rate and a lot of risk. So how do you minimize that risk to maximize your chances of success? We'll get the answer to that question on today's episode of the Upflip Podcast. I'm host Alex Freeman, and my guest today is Santino Filipelli, owner and principal broker of Modern Realty. Santino got into real estate negotiating short sales in 2010, just after the housing crash. After some time working in a large agency, he realized it wasn't set up for individual agents to succeed. He started Modern Realty in 2017 to correct that problem, creating an agency environment where individuals at all levels could thrive. Today, we'll hear Santino's insights on how to get started in real estate the right way. I'm excited to hear his advice, and I hope you are too. Let's dive into the conversation. Santino, first, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me back, Alex. I appreciate it.
So for those who haven't gone back and listened to our past interview or maybe seen you on some Upflip videos that you've done, can you briefly share your background and how you got into the real estate business?
Yeah, sure. So I got into the real estate business kind of on accident, kind of on purpose. When I was 19, I actually got my real estate license with never the intent of doing it as a full-time career. But when I was going through college to get my degree in firefighting and so forth, real estate just really started to pick up, and I found out I was actually really good at it. And I always knew I wanted to help people, but instead of saving lives, I realized I could also help people with financial goals and long-term goals. And it really let me have that ceiling that was over my head in all these professions lifted off. And so I dived right in, talked to my wife, and said, hey, I think I want to potentially quit. And she's like, well, I trust you. So I was like, okay, as long as you understand, we may be homeless if I don't sell anything.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to be doing great, and only upwards from here. So let's say someone has no real estate experience. What are kind of the first steps to get into this industry? You mentioned you got your real estate license at 19. Is getting the license the first step?
Yeah. So first of all, I think doing any kind of basic research and having a basic foundation of understanding of what real estate, which I think we'll go through during this podcast. I think, if you were the first step, if you want to become a real estate agent and you're just saying, hey, I have a general understanding. Yeah, that'd be the first step. There's so many websites, CE Trend. There's quite a few different websites that you can go on. You pay about $300 to $400 on there, and you take your credit hours, and then you have a final test that will be somewhere located in your city, depending on if they've adapted since COVID, and allow you to take it from home. But otherwise, you will go to your city, you'll take the test, and there you are. You're a realtor.
Now, there's obviously that initial cash outlay to get that license, sure. But before somebody does that, maybe what are some of the must-have skills or personality traits that could help a person thrive in the industry?
Because the barrier is so low, and some would say, to become a real estate agent, a lot of people will get their license and may not have the type of traits or skills, but be a really good test taker and be able to take the test, right? So to answer your question, a lot of the certain people who thrive in this industry, if you're familiar with the DISC test, usually have high D's or high I's. And if you're not familiar with the DISC test, it's people with a lot of drive, unrelentless work ethic, really high kind of aggressiveness, but not to the point where it's overbearing. But and then the high I is really what helps balance that out, because that's your people skills. That's your ability to hold conversations, relate to people, be outgoing, be gregarious. And, they say that those two are the ideal realtor traits to have. But there are so many different types of realtors that don't have high D's and high I's that are in the industry and can still do well. But there's something about having a high D and a high I that allows you to be what's called a rainmaker. in our industry, a team leader, a those people that you see, on TV shows and stuff like that.
So you got those high performing individuals. You got your selling sunset type folks.
Correct.
But the vast majority of people who enter and become real estate agents fail within their first 5 years.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? And what could a new agent do to make sure they're not part of that statistic?
So it's such a good question. And this is a question that I pondered before opening our brokerage. Because if you think about it, Alex, if you were a professor of a college course or, in your graduating class, 87% of them failed after 4 or 5 years, whatever it is. And only 13% made it. The question becomes then is what's wrong? Was it the teacher? Was it the coursework? Was it the students? Was it the way it was laid out? Or a combination of all those things, right? And so it's really relatable to real estate in that aspect because I think there are a few factors. A lot of times why people fail in this industry is they don't know what they're getting themselves into. They're leaving, a regular job and they see, like you said, the selling sunset realtors on TV, and they're like, wow, I look really good. I'm good with people. This could work. And I love talking to people or, hey, I used to sell cars, or I was a great salesperson at this job. That's real estate is not as what it appears on TV, and it's not as simple as being a good people person. So I think that's the first reason why there's a high failure rate is people just don't understand what it takes. And then the second is institutionally, we're only seeing in the last recent 10 years or so, most real estate brokerages changing their model. So the model used to be a very high cost to be at a brokerage with sometimes no, so they'd have to pay, $25,000 a year, and you have to guarantee it usually and back that, we're talking, 20 years ago or so, or 30 years ago, depending on where part of the country. But long story short, what's happened over the last 10 years is that cost has kind of in some brokerages came down. You have these, 100% brokerages with monthly fees. So that's kind of helped with these agents that are only closing 1 to 5 transactions a year because they're not having to spend a lot of money at their brokerage. So that's one of the reasons why the failure rate, I think, as well. And then the third reason, I think, is whenever you do get into these brokerages, if you're going into these brokerages that offer a bunch of, 100% options, it's kind of like you get what you pay for type of deal, right? They're not going to have a lot of staff. You may be joining a brokerage with 1,000 agents or 500 agents, and the support might be very minimal, or you pay a lot more money and maybe you have a lot more training, a lot more support, but then you have the cost of the overhead. And so I think the third reason is the brokerage in which it's set up is another one of the top reasons in which I think the failure rate is so high.
Now, Santino, I want to talk about the current real estate market a little bit. It has obviously the last 3 years have been a bit of a roller coaster of a ride. What are the most challenging aspects of the current real estate market, and what should agents be doing to meet that challenge?
Actually, the last 10 years have been actually really great in the real estate market, depending on who you are and I guess how you perceive it. But we are coming to a point where we're seeing interest rates rise higher than they have in the last, 10 years or so. And we're seeing buyers that were once qualified just 2 months ago are no longer qualified due to the interest rates. And so we're seeing the shift in the market. And I think we're also going to see a drop in the amount of agents that are going to continue to remain in the industry.
You mentioned, people leaving a steady job. So, I would imagine that, there's certainly a large share of people that say, hey, I'm sick of working for a corporation. I'm going to go work for myself, be a realtor. Other industries or niches that transfer particularly well to the real estate world, like, home inspectors or construction workers, or what kind of jump to mind for me? Do they have a leg up over new agents without that experience?
It's interesting because if you look at my background, you wouldn't see real estate as a potential career choice for me. I went from going to school to be a police officer to a firefighter to working in the hospital in cardiology to getting accepted into nursing school to then full time realtor after, well, part time realtor during that whole time. And then, just sell here, sell there. But to answer your question, some of these other trades that I've seen that have come in are if you've worked at a lot of, for example, our top sales producer, he came from the banking industry. Usually there's a reward or incentives for sales and, upselling. And so they're trained in that, but they're trained in such a way that it's not like aggressive like you would see at maybe a used car dealership. Nothing against used car sales people. There are some great ones out there who aren't like that, by the way. But we've seen crossovers from there that have done really well. We've seen people who, I don't necessarily know that I've seen anybody come from the contracting background that has been a magnificent realtor, but their wives usually or their husbands, vice versa, do really well because they're feeding them. But I think that people who succeed in this industry are going to be people who understand or come from jobs like banking, title and escrow. We see people come from some corporate jobs that have sales quotas, and these are different type of sales. So not all of them transcend completely, but really, what you're looking for is somebody who is not afraid to pick up the phone and has that ability to also be professional while still being bold.
I also understand that you have a YouTube video where you kind of explain the different types of real estate agents. Could you point our guests to where they could find that?
Yeah, it's just Modern Realty on YouTube. You should be able to find us. There'll be a video on there that will talk about, the number one question I get asked if you're thinking of becoming a realtor, watch this video. And it categorically breaks down, the perception of realtors, what the course is that you would do to become a realtor, and some of the mistakes that people make, when joining real estate. So I think that's key is that people understand those things.
Fantastic. And after you've checked out that video, if you want to get more insights into the nuts and bolts of getting started as a first-time entrepreneur, there's tons of helpful advice on the Upflip blog. You'll find it at upflip.com/blog, or click the blog tab at the top of the page if you're listening on our website. As you get more established in your career, you can systematize some more things. So what are some of those tools, websites, software programs that real estate agents can use to kind of systematize some of their tasks?
Yeah, absolutely. Follow Up Boss is a great CRM. Dan Corkill, the owner of Follow Up Boss, the creator of it, I know personally, and I think he did it. I think it's probably one of the best CRMs out there. So CRM is a client relationship management tool. It helps you navigate your database when your leads come in. It's a great tool to help systematize automated contact that goes out. Getting an assistant, whether virtual or real, is going to be a big factor. I would say if you're going to grow your business, that should be your first hire is an assistant, and they're going to help with some of the back end stuff. And then again, hiring your transaction coordinator, that'll really help systematize your process. And usually whatever brokerage you have, they will have some sort of back end system, whether it's dot loop, sky slope, or their own created back end system where you will put your documents in. But again, if you have a virtual assistant or a transaction coordinator or whoever, they will take care of that for you. So again, leveraging out and delegating out these tasks. You could even hire ISAs, inside sales agents, and they can take care of some of that lead generation time and outbound calls. And so it starts to free up. But with all that stuff, you have to be able to teach these people. You have to be able to tell them what you want, how you want it. So you have to know how to do it. I don't know if you can necessarily just come in and start hiring a bunch of people and have everything run. I think you have to really know what you're delegating out and how you want to delegate to make sure it represents your brand.
As a new agent is kind of entering the potential workplace, how should they be considering what agency they want to join?
So do a lot of interviews is my first thing, and really think about how you want to, I guess, grow as an agent. If you and it really just depends on your background. If you come from a family of realtors, and you already know quite a bit, then maybe starting off as an individual agent is great. Without selling our brokerage, right? I would say look for a brokerage that perhaps offers something similar to what we have, where you can maybe receive some leads, has great training, but yet still lets you operate your own business, where you can take what you've learned and use their leads or use their teachings to grow your brand and your business. But the main things you're going to want to ask about are caps and splits, right? So that caps are how much you have to pay a year. Splits are the percentage of each paycheck that go to what it is that your cap is. And then any additional fees, you're going to want to ask about what their training process looks like. And you're also going to want to ask about, growth opportunities, right? What is the growth opportunity here in this brokerage? Because at some point in your career, if you're doing well, you're going to get to a point and say, okay, selling houses is awesome and I'm really good at it, or I'm not. Either way, is there another place that I can grow into in this brokerage, that I could perhaps use my gifts or skills that I've learned somewhere else? So those are just the beginning ones. We could spend a whole bunch of time on things to look for in real estate brokerages. I would say one thing that's important above all is people look to these big name brokerages, and it's actually trending downwards where you're seeing more boutique brokerages open up across the country. But the belief was back a long time ago, not that long ago, but a few decades ago, that it was these big brands that are going to be the ones that are going to help you. Like Cascade Sotheby's is a big one, and I'm sure they're not going to be hurt by what I'm saying. But Cascade Sotheby's is often known with luxury, but in reality, it's actually over time, it's the agent because you'll find if you're in the business 8 years and you leave Cascade Sotheby's, your clients aren't going to call Cascade Sotheby's and say, hey, our agent left who was with you. We still want to be with Cascade, right? They're going to call you back, the agent who helped them. And so that's why developing your brand is important. And when you choose a brokerage, don't necessarily just look for the biggest names, because it's not always the best fit, but they may be.
What are the advantages, if they still exist, to joining that large agency? Or is it mostly downside and it looks like the trend is truly to that boutique agency and they should find that home?
Yeah, so I think there's something to say about these big brokerages that are doing well, right? So you can look on Google, but I mean, you're going to find, probably EXP, Keller Williams, on depending on where in the country you're at, Remax, Coldwell Banker. Some of the benefits to these are in certain areas of the country, they are the go-to brokerage, right? So on East Coast versus West Coast is very different. Like if we live on the West Coast and Remax is just not as relevant today as it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. You go on the East Coast, Remax is still like one of the go-to brokerages in some spots, above all other brokerages, which is really interesting. Some of the advantages, I would say, like, Keller Williams has done a great job at really expanding in their expansion program and franchising out their company. And I think one of the benefits to some of these brokerages is I guess, vast amount of, I mean, you can say the name and it is well known, I think is one benefit. But at the same time, you're also getting today a much more educated buyer and seller. So people will do their research, because we compete against these companies all the time, right? Listing appointments and stuff like that. But once they do their research and they look up that person that they interviewed, right? Regardless of what company they're from, and their presence on the internet and the reviews that they have and the experience that they have and the house that they've sold, it's not like a day and age where people can't find out who you are and what you do. So, I would say some of the benefits, in short, to some of these bigger brokerages is, I guess, that name. Some of them have a lot of money, so they're able to attract a certain clientele and have maybe some eternal resources, some built-in CRMs that they had designed themselves. But, again, it just depends on where you're at in the country. I personally find that more people are leaving these larger brokerages of 2, 3, 4, 500 people in a brokerage and looking for something where they can actually have contact with the principal broker or contact, or be part of. But, some of these bigger companies do a great job at having a great culture and really selling that. So the get-togethers are huge, like Keller Williams. They have family reunion. People come from all across the country, and so there's like 3, 4, 5,000 people at this reunion. And for some people, that's really attractive, just to have just that amount of people in your brokerage or associated with that name. So I don't. I would say it all depends on who you are and what you're looking for.
And how much of that has, as you were describing the way people research who the agent's going to be, my thought process was that feels like who's going to be the listing agent. How much of this has shifted because of sites like StreetEasy and Zillow, where buyers, particularly in home realty, are doing a lot of research themselves and finding the home that they want and then going to that listing agent?
If you're a buyer, it's probably in your best interest to be represented by not the listing agent directly, because you don't have necessarily unbiased in fact, in some states it's illegal. It's called dual representation, and in some states it's illegal. So they in some agents, even in our area, will not do it. They're like, you know what, too much liability. I can refer you to another agent and they can represent you. But it doesn't cost the buyers any more money because the listing agent or the seller pays the commissions as of right now. It would only make sense for you to use a buyer's agent. And so if you're a part of Zillow, if you're a part of these programs, they have an option to where if it's your listing, your face is right there. Now, downwards, you might have some other realtors that they advertise along with you. But at the end of the day, if you do a good job at putting your client's house out there through social media, through, different venues with target demographic, in targeting lead capture forms and stuff like that, pre-marketing, you're going to, increase your chances of generating the buyer. But a majority of the time, you're going to see that they are going to be represented by some of these people through Zillow and so they've affected the real estate industry in a way that's interesting, because you could essentially buy your way into being a really active realtor with almost zero experience.
This is going to bring us to the section of our show that we call our Fan Blitz questions. These come from our YouTube community, Upflip on YouTube. Go join the community and you can submit questions for future guests on the podcast. So for these, just real quick, one-hit answers. Don't think too long and hard about them. Just go for it with the instinct, whatever comes to you. So question number 1, if you could go back to the pre-pandemic world, what's one thing you would do in advance to plan for it?
I would ensure that we're able to maintain a solid culture and regular meetings virtually, or I guess somewhat closely, as compared to just stopping meetings altogether.
What kind of car do you drive?
Just sold my Porsche Panamera. I currently am Ubering.
Drives Uber. The Uber drives him.
Yeah.
Tell me about one not so great habit of yours that you want to get rid of.
Staying up too late, I think, is probably a big one.
What are the unwritten rules of the Modern Realty office?
Interesting. Actually, we pretty much have included everything in there, but like no drama is a big one. Like no gossip, no drama, right? We're really big on that, and it is actually written, but that's kind of one of the things is we're just really big on is no gossip, no drama.
Last question here. What's your favorite business book?
I would say Crushing It by Gary Vee, or The E-Myth, is another great business book.
So those were our Fan Blitz questions. Again, join us over on YouTube, Upflip on YouTube. Join the community. Pose your questions for future podcast guests. You mentioned, joining your local Realtors Association. Are there other professional organizations that a real estate agent should become a part of?
You have to join an association regardless. Every city has an association, and they're the ones that regulate your day-to-day operations as a realtor. So you'll have to, but getting involved in your association is different than joining it. And I encourage everyone, if you're a realtor and you're at a local association, get involved. There's YPN, which is Young Professionals Network, and it's not just for young people. There's people there all ages, but it's great because it focuses on things that new agents might want to learn. I was the president of our YPN here in our Portland metro area and vice president at one point, but there's also Master Circle. But outside of your association, there's these referral networks you can join where they take one from each like subsection of in careers, like an insurance person, a realtor, a construction person, and they'll have, maybe a 14 max, and then everyone kind of trades referrals. That's a great, but any kind of thing where you're involved in the community, maybe the Chamber of Commerce, maybe, volunteering, and anything that you can get involved with your community or involved with other people is going to help you as a realtor, whether that be just getting known or getting familiar with your other associates in the industry, is all beneficial.
So for that young real estate agent who doesn't have an established track record of sales just yet, how do they start securing clients?
Very good question. My best piece of advice is twofold. Is if you are a really good self-starter and you are the type of person who can get on YouTube University, so to speak, it's YouTube, or Google, and you can figure out your way to generate your own business and come up with your own style. Great, that's awesome. I would argue there are very few that are able to do that. But I would say if you're a new agent, you can join a team, right? This is what Keller Williams is probably the most known for, is their team model. I would be wary though, because a team that doesn't let you take credit for the deals that you sell and you have to close them underneath somebody else's name. Yes, you're learning the process, but you're not necessarily building your resume. So if you ever leave that team, when you leave, when someone looks you up, it still looks like you have no sales. So I would argue that if you're a new agent, you want to find a place that'll help give you potentially leads, teach you how to work them, a really good train pro, or maybe something smaller, maybe coming in as an admin somewhere, or try to look for somebody that's looking to mentor an agent and bring him on. In the beginning, the pay may not be great. Just remember that it's in the beginning as a realtor, you're not going to come in making a bunch of money. I can almost certainly guarantee, unless you have a husband or a wife who is a mass builder and they just give you a bunch of listings, or you're associated with a hedge fund and you're able to, but otherwise it's going to take at least a year or so or two to actually really start getting some decent income.
And what is that day-to-day work life of a typical real estate agent? How many hours in a week are they working, and what are some of the main tasks they're devoting that time to?
Man, Alex, it really depends on what kind of this kind of goes back to your question. What kind of realtors are there? So you have full-time realtors and then you have part-time realtors, so to speak. The part-time ones are like, hey, I am a mom or I'm a dad and I stay at home, but I have a real estate license that I will go and make a couple sales here. Their day-to-day is much different than somebody who is a full-time realtor. A full-time realtor, and everybody has their own kind of limitations or their own way of doing things. Some people are more heavy towards work-life balance. And I don't know how that's possible if you're a solo agent with no ties to the industry, as far as like your mom and dad weren't a realtor or anything like that. And you can come in, work 9 to 5 and just go home and be done, because realtors usually work when people get off work. Realtors work nights and weekends, right? Because people get off work and then they want to go see houses, and people don't work, and that's when realtors need to go show houses. So as you get further along in your career, I think that you can have more of a work-life balance. But just me personally, if we were taking me, for example, my days in the beginning years of my real estate career, were virtually nonstop. I would work, 18-hour days easily. I'd come home, like total talk time on my phone would be like 14 hours. I'd have no voice. And your day to day like operations is like, you're on the phone. I worked on my business. I worked in my business, I worked on my business during the day, from like when people were able to talk. And then I worked in my business, such as like social media, branding, at like nighttime, after like people would 9 p.m., and then I would begin to really start scheduling out my social media posts and, planning follow up and, really systematizing things. So the grind is real. If you want to succeed in this industry, especially in the beginning, like expect your life to have to make some sacrifices. And that's one thing that I think is a big thing, that if you're going to be that realtor that really wants to be in the top, 5% or whatever, where you're making six figures a year, you're going to need to be working around the clock. In the beginning of my career, I was taking phone calls at, 1, 2 in the morning from clients, because that's when they got off work, or they worked string shifts or graveyard, or maybe they're just weird, and they want to call me at 1 a.m. But I picked up my phone. And that's some of the things that set me apart. I have a client that was like that to this day. What has it been? It's been, almost 15 years. We are still friends, and that one of those people that would call me at like 1 in the morning, and I've sold multiple homes, and now they're into apartments and stuff like that. But the reason why they really appreciated me and continued to use me is they saw the hustle. They saw the ability for me to sacrifice my time and sacrifice friends that I was able to hang out with at times. So it's not for everybody, but the life in the beginning is tough. As you get more secure, you get a clientele, you can slow down a little bit and systematize things and get an assistant, stuff like that. But I would say be prepared to really put in the hours in the beginning.
So with that grind explanation, I think the next logical question is to then ask about the reward on that grind. So like, what is, that like kind of your top performer at Modern Realty? What are they taking home at the end of the year? And then maybe what is the more average agent taking home, and how does that compare to the industry?
Our top real estate agent at Modern Realty had the benefit of joining when it was really just a few agents here, one or two. And he was able to come alongside me and see what it was like. And we took every day to spend 3-4 hours a day lead genning, getting on the phone, making those calls. And he now is every day, to this day, he led one of our recent sales meetings and talks about how he still grinds, and he closed 84 transactions with no team by himself last year. And our average price point in our area is around 550,000. So if he's averaging about 2%, he made close to near $1 million last year. And that is a very not common thing, I will tell you. But his work ethic is impeccable. And he understood from the very beginning. He came from the baking industry, which was like 9 to 5, right? But he understood that when he was here, seeing what it took to succeed, and really adapt to that and put in the work, and it still pays dividends to him. But to this day, he still will. Now he has a family, he has kids, but he will still time block out that time to lead generate and everything like that. And so that's how much he's making, and that's how many transactions he's doing. But the average, I would say, it ranges significantly, but across the nation, the average income for a realtor, I believe right now, is around $55,000 to $60,000 a year. And we've been on a really hot run in the real estate market. Before, it was in the $40,000 range. So I think that there's a vast difference there. I think most realtors to come in, they think they're going to make over $100,000 a year. That's just simply not true. The average is around 55, 60,000. So the question is, do you really want to work and grind that hard and potentially only make 50, 60,000? Or is it better just to go find a job that's more consistent and not necessarily have to work and grind that hard? But in real estate, you get what you put into it.
What kind of online presence does a real estate agent need in 2022? What should be on the website? What social media platforms should they be on? All of that.
Alex, everything. As much as possible. I always have my agents, when they first come in, or, when we do a review or business plan, I'm like, okay, let's Google your name. Okay, let's see what pops up. And we do that. And I'm like, okay, now let's Google somebody else's name. And sometimes it'll be mine, sometimes it'll be somebody else's that we know that is a successful realtor. And I say, okay, do you see how the first page of Google is only that person's name, right? That shows up. That's what yours needs to look like. So everything from Facebook, Instagram, Yelp, medium.com for blogging, Zillow, anything with reviews, anything that can help build your presence, content, YouTube obviously is a great one. And again, how you distribute that content and what content you put out, again, is going to be dependent upon the type of realtor you want to be. But just being a realtor to be known in your area, I would highly recommend even putting out content on all these social media platforms about local businesses, maybe doing an interview about, it's called hyperlocalism. And it's all about, when people Google your area, your house is for sale, right? It's going to pick up your name or something that you've done in that city through your hashtags, through your SEO, through all of that. So again, Google business page, all that stuff, every possible online presence you can have, I would definitely do it. And you can find a list. You could go to Google and you can go top websites to be involved in as a realtor or be subscribed to as a realtor, right? And it'll break it down for you. There's tons of them. But in this day and age, the better presence you have and the more content you're putting out, especially, and mix it up. Don't just only do real estate stuff. Do some personal stuff too, and be vulnerable. Most people don't like being on video or whatnot, but I think that you have to get out of your comfort zone and really be okay with that too. Video marketing is a huge one because it ranks high on search engines.
For my last question here, I'm going to ask you to just kind of gaze into your crystal ball. And where do you see the real estate industry going over the next 10 years? What are the major shifts or changes that you see coming?
Well, let me pull out that crystal ball here. I haven't used it in a while. So I see that. It's interesting. We see interest rates rising, right? Which you hear the doomsdayers saying, okay, we're going to have a huge crash. I don't see that happening personally. I think that we will see a correction. I think we're going to see a slowdown in the amount of price point growth year over year because it has to be. Right now we've seen price points year over year grow in double digits, 13, 14%, 12%. That's just not a normal market. But the problem that we have here is that we also have an inventory problem because you have an older generation of baby boomers, I guess you could call them, generation that have real estate and they're looking to downsize. And then you have first time home buyers or millennials or the probably the largest first time home buying group right now. I think they comprise 75%. So we have an inventory problem. And also that has a lot to do with these hedge funds and these big corporations coming in and buying up real estate as well. So as far as like things changing, I think that we're going to see a shift in the market as far as prices maybe not rising as quickly. We're still going to see high demand for property. But the problem is that if you take somebody maybe like me or somebody else who has bought in some properties over the last 10 years, who now has a bunch of equity and low interest rates, there's no incentive for anyone to sell below or drop their prices. So I don't see anything like where you're going to see a market crash or people selling below what they need to, unless life just hit them really hard for some reason. Maybe, who knows, they went bankrupt or I don't know. But otherwise, some other interesting things, you're starting to see crypto, blockchain come into the real estate market. People have been trying to disrupt the real estate industry for a while now, last like 25 plus years with technology and kind of replace the agent. That's been very difficult to do. No one's been successful in it. There are startups that have a limited agent, but really most of the things that we're seeing have not been able to do that. Will they? Who knows? But I think over the next 10 years, I think the process of buying a house is going to become much faster. I think you're going to see consolidation with these real estate brokerages, not just doing real estate, but also owning mortgage companies, escrow companies, and so forth, because right now it's just a race to the bottom. And I think you're also going to see a decrease in the next 10 years of the amount of realtors that are in the market, because if you've been in the real estate market up even, like I said, 7, 8 years ago, it's been a pretty good run for you. Like you could be a mediocre real estate, even not a bad realtor, and have done pretty decent in the last few years, if not more. So this is really going to kind of help weed out the cream of the crop once things start slowing down a little bit, and bring back those people who aren't afraid to get on the phones and get out there and knock on doors and put the time in and nurture their database. Those are the agents that are really going to start winning.
That is going to do it for this edition of the Upflip podcast. Join us again every week with new interviews with entrepreneurs. Go find us also on YouTube and check out the Upflip blog. Santino Filipelli, owner and principal broker of Modern Realty. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thank you so much, Alex. It's such a pleasure. We love you guys.